Have you ever felt that the symbols we take for granted might be carrying secrets older than time itself? Hidden beneath ancient myths and forgotten rituals, there's a story we're still living without even knowing it. A story about a fish, a shepherd, a cosmic battle that didn't just happen out there, but is unfolding inside us every single day. What if the faith you think you understand is just the surface? What if behind every simple sign lies a deeper call? If you're ready to see beyond tradition into the heart of the mystery, let's dive in. Carl Jung once suggested that religious symbols are not just ancient relics. They are living expressions of deep psychological truths that echo within the collective unconscious. When we look at the symbol of the shepherd and the lamb in early Christianity, especially its overlap with the astrological age of Aries, the era associated with the ram, it's easy to see this idea at work. But when we really sit down and think about it, stripped away from historical analysis, something even more personal starts to emerge. These symbols still live inside us today, even if we don't realize it. The shepherd is not just a figure leading a flock. He represents a certain kind of leadership, a model of care, of protection, and sometimes of sacrifice. The lamb, on the other hand, stands for innocence, vulnerability, and the price of redemption. During the age of Aries, humanity's collective imagination, whether through mythology, astrology, or early Christian thought, seemed to fixate on these dynamics. It's not hard to see why. Life in ancient times was brutally unpredictable. Having a powerful protector and having hope that innocence might be preserved or redeemed would have been incredibly psychologically grounding. When we fast forward to today, working in modern offices, building businesses, raising families, we might think we're a long way from shepherds and lambs. But really, aren't we still playing out these old roles? If you look carefully, almost every workplace has its shepherds, the managers, mentors, or even just colleagues who seem to naturally take care of others. And almost every one of us has been the lamb at some point too, feeling exposed, overwhelmed, or hoping someone stronger would step in and show us the way when everything felt like too much. That's why Jung's view still feels so startlingly true. Symbols like the shepherd and lamb aren't dead. They're simply moving, changing shapes to fit the times. In a way, the corporate mentor who notices you're drowning under too much work and quietly steers you back to solid ground is today's good shepherd. And the burned-out, disillusioned worker who clings to the hope that someone, somewhere, still cares. That's today's lamb. However, there's a twist. In the ancient world, the shepherd was often seen as a divinely appointed guide, someone whose authority was not questioned. Today, the concept of leadership is messier, more fragile. The shepherds in modern life are not always benevolent. Sometimes, they lead for selfish reasons. Sometimes, they don't know where they're going themselves. This is where Jung's deeper point about the shadow, the dark side that lurks behind every bright symbol, becomes painfully clear. The same psychological force that makes someone a nurturing guide can, if twisted, turn them into a controlling, self-serving figure. And the same innocence that makes the lamb lovable can, if unchecked, lead to helplessness or martyrdom that serves no one. So, when we think about the shepherd and lamb today, maybe we need a more balanced, more self-aware version of those archetypes. Maybe being a modern shepherd isn't about saving others to boost your own ego, but about walking beside them, offering guidance without stripping away their independence. And maybe being a lamb isn't about being blindly led, but about recognizing when you need help and having the strength to ask for it without shame. In real life, the roles blur. One day, you're guiding a new teammate through a tough project, and the next, you're the one sitting in your car after a brutal meeting, wondering if you're even good enough to keep going. That back and forth, that dance between strength and vulnerability, is what makes the ancient symbols still so hauntingly relevant. It's also worth remembering that Aries, the sign of the ram, is not just about leadership, but about courage and beginnings. The early Christians, operating under constant threat, must have drawn deep courage from these symbols. The brave shepherd facing wolves, the innocent lamb trusting in a greater plan. In our world, starting over, taking risks, and standing up for what matters still demands that same ancient bravery. In the end, the shepherd and the lamb are not relics of a forgotten age. They're inside us. Every time we step up for someone else without expecting a reward, every time we admit our need and dare to hope, someone will meet it with kindness. Jung wasn't just analyzing old myths. He was mapping out the landscape of the human soul, a landscape we're still walking every single day. And honestly, when I look around at the people I know, the exhausted co-worker quietly helping others, the friend who's always there with a word of encouragement, the quiet moments when we admit, even just to ourselves, that we need a hand, I think, maybe just maybe, we're carrying those ancient symbols forward, better than we realize. Carl Jung once proposed that ancient myths and religious symbols aren't random. They are profound attempts by humanity to map its own psychological truths. When we look at the image of the fish and its connection to the birth of the Savior, especially as it intertwines with astrology and myth, we're stepping into one of the oldest, most persistent dreams of the human heart. The hope that even in the depths of chaos, something or someone will emerge to save us. The story is simple on the surface. A woman, clothed with the sun and crowned with stars, is about to give birth to a child destined to rule the nations, even as a dragon waits to devour him. Beneath it lies a rich web of echoes. Leto fleeing from Python, Aphrodite leaping into the Euphrates with her son and becoming fishes, Isis protecting Horus. The fish appears again and again, symbolizing not just survival, but transformation. The idea that life itself, even when swallowed by darkness, can find a way forward. Today, we live in a world that prides itself on being rational. We schedule our lives by calendars and clock apps, not by the phases of the moon. And yet, deep down, the same fears, the same hopes still haunt us. Think about it. When life feels overwhelming, when work pressures pile up, when relationships fracture, when the future looks murky, don't we still secretly long for a savior? Maybe not a divine child glowing with light, but something or someone that promises, you're going to be okay. The image of the fish, diving into the depths and surviving the impossible, resonates even more now than it did 2,000 years ago. It's not about literal fish. It's about the human experience of descent into difficulty and the dream of emerging changed, stronger, maybe even reborn. In practical life today, this pattern is everywhere if you pay attention. It's the professional who, after being fired, spends months in a wilderness of self-doubt before finding a calling more authentic than the job they lost. It's the parent who, overwhelmed and exhausted, finds unexpected strength during a midnight crisis. It's even the small daily moments. Picking yourself back up after a rough day, choosing to believe in possibility when cynicism would be easier. One of the most profound insights Jung's work leads us toward is this. Myths survive because they mirror something inside us. They aren't dead stories. They are living, breathing guides. The fish isn't just an ancient Christian symbol or a sign of zodiacal Pisces, it's a timeless reminder that salvation is not always about sudden miracles. Sometimes it's about trusting the unseen currents that are carrying us, even when everything feels like darkness. Yet there's another layer too. In those ancient myths, birth often comes with danger. The savior isn't born into safety. He's born while dragons wait to kill him. And isn't that still true? New beginnings in real life are rarely easy. Every time you take a risk, a career change, a new relationship, a move to a different city, you're birthing something into a world that can feel hostile or indifferent. The myth doesn't promise safety, it promises transformation. In our era of relentless hustle culture, it's tempting to think of success as a straight line upward. But life teaches otherwise. Real growth often looks more like the old myths. A descent into the waters, a period of not knowing, of being swallowed by circumstances, and finally, a re-emergence, wiser, tougher, maybe even more compassionate. If we forget these stories, or dismiss them as just old superstitions, we risk losing something vital, the understanding that struggle and redemption are part of the same process. The woman clothed with the sun, the fish saving Aphrodite, the savior born under threat, all remind us that the things that threaten to destroy us are often the very forces that refine us. One last thing. In the myths, the mother is crucial. She's the protector, the bearer, the one who stands between the fragile newborn hope and the forces of destruction. In modern life, we still need mothers, not necessarily literal ones, but figures who nurture fragile beginnings. It could be a mentor who believes in you before you believe in yourself, a friend who sits with you in your darkest hour, or even the part of yourself that refuses to give up when everything seems lost. When I reflect on all this, especially through the lens of people I know slogging through everyday struggles, deadlines, mortgages, illnesses, layoffs, I realize the ancient symbols were never just about cosmic destinies. They were about surviving the nights when the dragons are real and hope seems foolish. They were about remembering that even in the deepest darkness, life is still moving, still gestating something worth fighting for. Carl Jung once pointed out that every symbol of light inevitably casts a shadow. It's a simple but unsettling truth. Whenever we raise something up as pure or perfect, we also invite its opposite to appear, whether we acknowledge it or not. When we look at the strange, almost haunting image of the Lamb in the book of Revelation, the Lamb that is no longer meek, but crowned with horns and fire, we're seeing this principle unfold right at the heart of Christian symbolism. At first glance, it feels deeply contradictory. The Lamb is supposed to be the gentlest image imaginable, innocent, sacrificial, a figure of quiet suffering. But in Revelation, the Lamb isn't passive anymore. He's fierce, conquering, almost terrifying. He carries a rod of iron. He brings wrath. He is a warrior. This isn't the Lamb of Sunday school stories. This is something more complex, something that defies easy categories. When you sit with this long enough, it starts to feel incredibly familiar, almost painfully so. In the modern world, especially for those of us grinding through work, trying to stay afloat, trying to be good people while dealing with endless demands, there's a deep tension we don't always talk about. We're expected to be kind, patient, humble, but we're also pushed to be strong, assertive, unyielding when necessary. How many times have you felt torn between keeping the peace and standing your ground, between forgiving someone and protecting yourself? The Lamb that fights mirrors the reality that sometimes survival itself demands fierceness. Love demands boundaries. Goodness demands strength. You can't stay soft in a world that sometimes chews up the gentle and spits them out. But at the same time, if you give yourself over completely to anger, to bitterness, you lose the very thing you were trying to protect. That split between gentleness and power, compassion and judgment, runs right through our daily lives. It shows up when we confront a toxic manager who's pushing us too far. It surfaces when we defend someone who's being unfairly blamed. It's there when we fight to save a marriage, or a friendship, or a piece of our own sanity. We don't get to be just lambs anymore. Sometimes we have to be lambs with horns. Jung's insight helps us understand that this isn't a flaw, it's a necessary complexity. No human being is purely light or purely dark. No ideal survives reality without adapting. When we try to live only in the light, only in kindness, only in sacrifice, we invite the shadow to creep in unexamined. It's better, and far more honest, to face it head-on, to recognize that within every good person there is also anger, pride, fear, and the instinct to fight back. And here's the thing, that fighting lamb, that fierce redeemer, doesn't erase the gentler image, it completes it. It tells us that real goodness isn't weak, real compassion isn't naive. It stands its ground. It defends what must be defended. It knows how and when to say no. This has real consequences for how we live now. In a culture that often prizes surface-level positivity, good vibes only, stay humble, just be nice, we're starving for a deeper, more durable kind of goodness. A goodness that knows how to protect itself. A goodness that isn't afraid to draw lines. We need it in our workplaces, in our communities, in our families. When you think about the people you respect most, chances are they aren't the ones who never rocked the boat. They're the ones who manage to be kind without being a doormat, courageous without being cruel, firm without losing their humanity. They're the ones who carry in their own way the spirit of the warrior lamb. That's why the Book of Revelation's lamb still speaks so powerfully today, even if the imagery feels strange or unsettling. It's telling us that the time comes when innocence must be defended, when gentleness must be protected by strength, and that real leadership, real love, real endurance are always mixtures of light and fire, humility and iron. We can't live only in one half of ourselves. If we try, life and our own subconscious will find ways to remind us of the shadow we've ignored. It might come out as suppressed rage, or quiet resentment, or the painful realization that being nice didn't protect what mattered most. Better to be whole from the beginning, to walk through life knowing that, like the lamb, we might one day have to roar. In the end, the Lamb of Revelation isn't a betrayal of the Gospel's gentle beginnings. It's the next necessary chapter. It reminds us that spiritual growth isn't about becoming less human. It's about becoming more complete. And maybe, just maybe, when we find ourselves standing at the crossroads, torn between forgiveness and resistance, patience and action, we're not failing. We're living out the very tension that the ancient symbols knew all along was part of becoming fully, fiercely alive. Carl Jung once warned that when we push uncomfortable truths into the shadows, especially when it comes to our deepest beliefs, we don't get rid of them. We only make them stronger, more dangerous, and more likely to erupt when we least expect it. Nowhere is this clearer than when we look at how both religious tradition and human psychology have wrestled with the existence of evil. And if we're honest, it's something we still struggle with every day, whether we talk about it or not. In ancient texts like the Psalms and the Book of Job, you can feel the raw tension. A God who promises steadfast love, but who also seems capable of devastating rejection. It's not neat. It's not easy. And that's exactly the problem modern life still faces. We're taught, sometimes directly, sometimes subtly, that everything should make sense, that the good guys always win, that if you work hard and stay kind, life will reward you. But real life sometimes feels like it missed the memo. Maybe you work for years at a company, give them everything you've got, and then one day you're laid off with a generic email. Maybe you pour your heart into a relationship, only to watch it crumble through no clear fault of your own. Maybe you see good people suffer, while those who cheat and manipulate seem to soar. Where's the fairness in that? Where's the loving, orderly universe we were promised? If you've ever sat at your kitchen table late at night, asking yourself questions like that, quiet questions, the ones you rarely voice out loud, you're not alone. And you're also closer to ancient wisdom than you might think. Because the truth is, religious traditions like Christianity tried to resolve this by focusing on God's goodness, emphasizing forgiveness, heaven, ultimate justice. It was a beautiful answer, but it wasn't the whole answer. As Jung hinted, by ignoring or minimizing the dark, we set ourselves up for even greater confusion and despair when life shows us just how messy and unfair it can be. We still see this today, in how uncomfortable we are talking about suffering, evil, and injustice in real terms. Look around. When disaster strikes, when a good person dies young, when war breaks out, when tragedy hits, how often do you hear shallow platitudes instead of real, honest grappling with what it means? Everything happens for a reason, people say, or it's all part of a plan. Maybe those words help in the moment, but sometimes they feel hollow. They don't answer the aching why. Jung's insight pushes us to a deeper place. He reminds us that evil, real evil, is not just a failure in someone else or in the world. It's something we all have to face within ourselves too. Our anger, our selfishness, our indifference. Pretending it doesn't exist, covering it up with positive slogans or comforting stories, only makes it harder to deal with when it inevitably surfaces. And make no mistake, it does surface. In workplaces where toxic cultures grow because no one wants to confront bad leadership. In families where old wounds fester because people are too polite or too scared to talk about them. In communities where injustice is tolerated because standing up would mean stepping into uncomfortable conflict. Every time we turn away from the difficult truth, we empower it. Yet, there's hope here too, because when we stop pretending and start facing reality as it is, not as we wish it would be, we open the door to real strength, real resilience. Not the brittle kind that collapses at the first sign of trouble, but the kind that bends, endures, adapts. We become people who can hold sorrow and hope in the same heart, who can work for justice even when the odds look terrible, who can love others and ourselves without denying the brokenness that's part of the deal. You see it in everyday heroes, the co-worker who quietly calls out a wrong, even if it costs them politically. The friend who shows up when everyone else disappears because grief is too messy. The parent who tells their kid the truth, gently but firmly, instead of hiding behind fairy tales. These aren't the people who deny darkness. They're the ones who walk through it, carrying their light with them. And yes, it's hard, it's messy, it's exhausting sometimes, but it's real, it's human, and it's necessary. In a strange, paradoxical way, facing evil doesn't make us less faithful or less hopeful. It makes us more so. Because hope that survives in the face of evil isn't cheap, it's earned. Faith that persists after heartbreak isn't naive, it's courageous. Maybe that's what the old prophets and poets were really trying to tell us. Not that life would be easy or fair, but that we are called to live anyway, to love, to build, to hope. Not because the world is perfect, but because it isn't. In the end, the greatest danger isn't that evil exists. It's that we might pretend it doesn't. Better to face it with clear eyes and open hearts, and refuse to let it have the final word. Because when we do that, we don't just survive. We help carry forward a deeper, truer kind of humanity. The kind that Jung believed was not only possible, but essential for our future. Carl Jung once pointed out that symbols often have deeper roots than we realize. Crossing cultures, religions, and even time itself, they don't just pop up randomly. They grow from something universal inside us. When we look at the fish symbol in early Christianity and its possible connection to the zodiac sign of Pisces, it's clear that we're standing at a crossroads of myth, spirituality, and raw human need. At first glance, the connection seems simple. Christ appears during the age of Pisces. The symbol of the fish becomes a secret sign among early Christians, and astrology hangs quietly in the background, whispering its influence. But when we look closer, the story is anything but simple. It's not just about aligning birth dates and star charts. It's about how human beings, in the midst of chaos and fear, reach instinctively for something ancient, something that can anchor them when the world feels too big and too uncertain. Today, we don't live under the same sky of omens and constellations, at least not consciously. But deep down, the desire for signs, for meaning, for cosmic reassurance hasn't gone anywhere. Think about how many people still scan horoscopes or look for signs from the universe when making hard decisions. It's not childishness. It's a human hunger for connection, for the feeling that our lives are part of something larger than the next deadline, the next mortgage payment, the next business report. In early Christian times, the fish offered exactly that kind of reassurance. It was a discreet, almost hidden affirmation. You are not alone. You belong to something bigger. In a hostile world where faith could get you killed, the simple sketch of a fish scratched into a wall or drawn in the dirt carried enormous power. It wasn't just a symbol. It was a lifeline. And here's where Jung's idea hits home. The fish isn't just a historical artifact. It's a living expression of a psychological truth that we still experience today. We all need symbols that tell us we're part of something enduring, something that will outlast our fears, our mistakes, even our mortality. But there's a caution here too. It's easy and tempting to fall into a kind of magical thinking, to treat symbols as talismans that guarantee safety or success. That wasn't the original point. The fish didn't promise Christians they wouldn't suffer. It promised them that even in suffering, they were part of something sacred. I think about this often when I watch friends go through tough times, layoffs, divorces, health scares. There's often a desperate search for meaning, for a pattern, for some kind of reassurance that their suffering isn't random. And while modern culture offers countless distractions, scrolling, shopping, binge-watching, what we really need is something quieter and deeper. A reminder that even when life feels like it's falling apart, there is a deeper story still unfolding underneath. That's what the fish meant. That's what it can still mean. And in a funny way, the fish being a creature of the water, a symbol of mystery, depth, and transformation, makes perfect sense. Water has always symbolized the unknown, the unconscious, the place where growth happens invisibly. And isn't that still true? Some of the most important changes in our lives happen when we're underwater, when we're lost, grieving, uncertain. We don't always see it until later, but those dark, disorienting seasons are often where real transformation takes root. So maybe we don't need to believe literally in astrology to appreciate the deep wisdom of those ancient connections. Maybe we just need to remember that the story of the fish, like the story of Pisces, is about trusting the invisible work happening beneath the surface. Especially now, when so much feels uncertain, maybe the fish reminds us, you are being carried by something deeper than you can see. Keep swimming, keep believing, keep moving forward, even when you can't see the shore. Carl Jung taught that symbols weave together the visible and the invisible parts of life, that they give form to things we feel but cannot fully explain. And when we look at the fish as a final, comprehensive symbol in early Christianity, we see one of the richest tapestries ever woven from myth, hope, and the raw longing for redemption. The fish wasn't just a secret code among the faithful. It was a symbol of everything Christianity dared to hope for. Rebirth after destruction, healing after suffering, unity after exile. Wrapped inside that simple shape were ideas as big and heavy as the human heart could carry. And when we think about it today, the same hopes still live inside us. We may not scratch fishes into the walls of our workplaces or carve them into gravestones anymore, but in our own way, we're still looking for what the fish promised. We want to believe that broken things can be made whole. We want to believe that love can survive betrayal. We want to believe that death is not the final word. The fish, standing at the cusp of the astrological age of Pisces, captured all these longings. It embodied the idea that even in a world torn by injustice, violence, and uncertainty, there was still a movement toward redemption, still a stream running beneath the chaos, pulling everything toward healing. And that's not just ancient history. We see it play out every day in small, stubborn acts of hope. When someone forgives a betrayal that would have been easier to hate. When a burned-out worker starts a new dream from scratch instead of giving up. When communities rebuild after disasters, not because it's easy, but because life demands it. The fish's mythological layers, the birth, the danger, the rebirth, aren't just stories about distant heroes. They're about us. Every time we risk ourselves for love, every time we face down despair, we're living that myth again. But here's where it gets complicated, and even more powerful. In many myths, the fish mother is also a danger to her son. Birth is entwined with death. Rebirth always carries a cost. It demands a letting go, a loss, sometimes even a death of what we thought we needed most. We don't talk about this much in modern life. We like stories of growth that are clean and inspirational. We don't like talking about the grief that often precedes real change. But the fish reminds us, the old has to be swallowed before the new can be born. And sometimes, that process feels more like drowning than swimming. Real hope, the kind that endures, isn't the absence of suffering. It's the refusal to let suffering have the last word. Real rebirth often requires real death. The death of an old dream, an old identity, an old illusion. And yet, even as we let go, the story promises that something larger is at work. That we are not lost, not alone, not adrift. The fish, swimming in the deep unseen currents, reminds us that life itself is bigger, older, and stronger than our individual losses, that there is a movement toward wholeness, even when we can't see it. In a world that often feels fragmented, rushed, and brutally pragmatic, remembering this older, slower wisdom can change everything. It can teach us to trust the unseen seasons of our lives, to honor both the births and the deaths, to swim forward, even when the water is dark. Because in the end, that's what salvation really means. Not escaping life's hardships, but passing through them and being made new. And And sometimes, all it takes to keep going is the faint memory of a shape. Simple, ancient, and utterly faithful, moving just ahead of us in the deep. Maybe the fish was never just a sign. Maybe it was a map, a way back to something we lost, long before we could name it. A reminder that even when life feels adrift, some deeper current is still carrying us forward. You don't have to see the whole ocean to trust the waves beneath your feet. If something today stirred your heart or made you wonder a little more about the symbols we live by, I invite you to stay on this journey with me. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your reflections below. I'd love to hear where your own journey is taking you.